what you don't realize is, change is difficult, right? And, it is difficult for us even in our daily personal lives. And so is the case in large organizations, especially when it comes down to, shop floor operations. People have been doing the same thing, for the last 20, 25, 30 years, and you're asking them to change, overnight, which is not easy to do. So really working through that process of communicating the change, getting people's buy-in, getting their engagement, I think has been, a very crucial lesson for me.
Jeevan Mulgund, Jennifer, this is an awesome episode. What did you think?
Oh man, this one could have gone on forever for me. This was fantastic. Some of the things that really struck me throughout the course of this conversation is Jeevan's just incredible capability to deeply understand some of the constraints and the opportunities in the industry, to understand those, and then yet the drive and that curiosity to really marry that to the organizational implications to drive that change. It's inspiring. It was outstanding.
He's a triple threat, right? He's an operator, a leader, he's a technologist, he's an investor.
Yeah.
And so we just get to talk across all those different angles. And I think that gives him a unique experience and perspective on the space.
Yeah, and I heard several times throughout the course of the conversation, he did always bring it back to people, process, technology, and one of those three pillars. And it's just inspiring to see the way that his mind thinks about it.
There's some great use cases. So he talks a lot about right-sizing technology, and I love that he digs in deeply. And what he's doing with IGNOVA, folks are going to hear, helping advance U.S. manufacturing is really inspiring, and just bringing the right piece of it, piece by piece. Anyways, let's not hold folks back. This is a fantastic episode.
You bet. Let's jump in.
We are thrilled to welcome Jeevan Mulgund to the show, a global manufacturing leader, supply chain strategist, now investor, whose career journey spans from the shop floor at Tata Motors to leading multi-billion-dollar transformations at Honeywell, ultimately to founding the Ape Collective and IGNOVA Ventures. With deep experience across production, sourcing, and digital operations, Jeevan brings a rare operator-investor perspective to the challenges and opportunities shaping the industrial manufacturing today. At Honeywell, Jeevan rose through the ranks to become Vice President of Integrated Supply Chain, where he orchestrated global manufacturing footprint strategies and introduced technologies like additive manufacturing, automation, digitization, across a complex network of sites. Today, through IGNOVA, he partners with US-based aerospace, defense, and industrial companies to modernize operations, strengthen domestic capacity, and scale business through smart systems and practical leadership. In this episode, we'll dive into what it takes to marry foundational operational systems with modern AI tools, how to evaluate a factory's readiness for transformation, why MES isn't always the answer. We'll also explore the talent gaps limiting U.S. competitiveness and how to build resilient, tech-enabled supply chains from the ground up. Jeevan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for the kind introduction. And it's a great privilege to be here, part of the speaker series with you and Jennifer. Thanks again for having me over.
Thank you so much for joining. Want to start out, Jeevan. It's been just amazing having you as a mentor for a while, and I want to pull you back to the earlier days of your career and have you kind of build that up for us. So you worked as a production and manufacturing engineer at Tata Motors, we mentioned, also Eaton, implementing all kinds of systems, statistical process control, smart manufacturing in its early days, and building up to the AI of today. I guess take us back to those formative years. What specific lessons from the shop floor, from throughput, quality challenges, et cetera, do you still pull on today that have informed your perspective?
Sure. You're taking me back a long ways, Andrew, and that probably kind of starts putting an age statement on me.
Not too far though, right?
My experience in both Tata Motors as well as with Eaton, where I began my career here in the U.S., was a great example of kind of jumping into, something that I had no idea about. Education doesn't prepare you for what you're going to be experiencing here in the industrial workplace. And, you go to the shop floor and you start learning, what what's happening there, and you're trying to kind of figure out, how do I, apply my knowledge and all the experience, and pretty much right away you realize that you have to kind of start with a very flexible and open mindset and listen to what people are saying, right? That is so critical. And one of the things that you realize very quick is just because you are an engineer and come with great qualifications, people are not going to listen to you, right? They're going to test you. They're going to make sure that you know what you're saying. Not only that, but you will do what you say. So there's a lot of work involved in gaining their respect and credibility. I'll give you a good example. One of the first roles that I had in Eaton, I was supposed to modernize a process, a CNC machining process.
Okay.
And, for me, I spent a lot of time, trying, talking to the operators, understanding the issues, and talking to the previous engineers, understanding what had worked before, what had not worked before. But to really learn what the process required and, the technology that I needed to deploy, I had to, get to the machine and run the machine. I had to run parts. I had to make parts. I had to program the machine, make parts, and really experience what it felt like to be in the shoes of an operator, what it requires to make program changes, tooling changes, checking the art, measuring quality, right? So once I did that, not only was I confident about myself, but I also realized that the people around me started thinking about me a lot differently. They realized that I was actually taking an active interest in solving their problems. And so I got a lot more interest and engagement as a result of that. So gaining respect and credibility, I think, is super crucial in those early days. And then the thing that you realize as you start working with them and start introducing these changes is all about what we call change management.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody talks about change management, and what you don't realize is, change is difficult, right? And, it is difficult for us even in our daily personal lives. And so is the case in large organizations, especially when it comes down to, shop floor operations. People have been doing the same thing, for the last 20, 25, 30 years, and you're asking them to change, overnight, which is not easy to do. So really working through that process of communicating the change, getting people's buy-in, getting their engagement, I think has been, a very crucial lesson for me. And those lessons, kind of gaining the respect and credibility or managing the change effectively, with the people that you work, those have been important lessons that have, carried, all through my professional life.
Oh, that's impressive. The CNC project at Eaton, and then just the fact that, yeah, from the very beginning, change management as a lesson. I think that's something that I feel like on average people, they don't even start tackling till maybe 10 years into their career. So that's fantastic that was kind of an early foundation for you. I'm not surprised, given all the great advice I've gotten from you, but nonetheless, that's impressive.
Yeah, Andrew hears me talk about that a lot. How important I think I say this on all of the time. It's probably overplayed that, you talk about the technology and the amazing things it can do in a factory. And honestly, the technology, we've said 1,000 times, is kind of the easy part. It's the governance that really is the challenging piece. I kind of want to walk through some of your experience with that. I want to dig in a little bit there, Jeevan. At Honeywell, you began early, I think, in business development, if I remember correctly, and then rose through the ranks, eventually to overall VP of integrated supply chain. Talk to us a little bit about your career journey, what you learned. More specifically for me, I think I always am interested in what's changed and what's stayed the same. What lessons can you take from that now and apply to the next generation of digital manufacturing? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jennifer. My journey at Honeywell has been anything but well-designed and planned career path. What you would see across my career in Honeywell, and I've been extremely fortunate to be part of a very diverse company like Honeywell, where I got to work in aerospace, as well as on the automation control solution side of the business, which was two completely different businesses with two completely different product portfolios and customers. So within Honeywell, you got the benefit of working across many different companies, which is, quite the privilege, as you can imagine. My journey with Honeywell, as you saw, is anything but a great example of jumping into new experiences and challenges. For me, that first stint into business development, as an example, was a great example of what does an engineer have to do in mergers and acquisitions? What does an engineer have to do with business development? But it was that process mindset, right, that was quite attractive for the people who said, hey, I think you can make a difference here. And for me, it was a great learning, where I could learn the front end of the business, spend time with customers, spend time with the business development teams, and help them understand how we can kind of create these playbooks through a very consistent application of a process. Right. So for me, it was kind of carrying this toolkit that you developed over a period of time and then applying it in all these different and challenging environments. My career path has then taken me through a variety of different geographies. I worked with Honeywell. With Eaton, I worked in the UK. With Honeywell, I worked in the US, in China. And what that gives you is the kind of experience that I don't think you can get in a normal job, where you're working across different cultures, and not just working across different cultures as in you're in a Zoom call working across different cultures. You are actually in that different culture, experiencing it and trying to figure out how do I influence this culture? How do I help make the right decisions given the local flavor, if you may, right? So, typically in a company like this, you'll get this big edict of deploying a certain initiative or launching a certain project. And now you have to work with the local teams, be it in, Singapore, be it in Malaysia, be it in China, be it in India. And you have to figure out, how can I make this work locally? How can I make this exciting locally? And how can I make sure that it gives us the benefits that we're looking for? So a lot of times you have to kind of think about this adage of, operate globally and act locally. And that is very true of, my role in a variety of different kind of functions that I've led. The last thing that has been very instrumental for me as I've gone across a variety of these roles is the role of good teams, right? I mean, you're as good as your team. And, for me, I've been very fortunate to, in some cases, choose my own team or select my own team. And in some cases, I've been, fortunate to, lead exceptional people. In any case, my effectiveness and the success of the organization was based on the team, their diversity, their ability to bring in fresh ideas, their ability to debate, argue, but at the end of the day, through teamwork, making sure that we met common objectives. So having great people on your team, having people that make me look good was always my biggest objective, and that I think is quite instrumental here in deploying initiatives as we talk about big enterprises, working across multiple geographies, multiple locations, different cultures, and I think that for me are some of the key lessons that I would kind of take from my career journey at Honeywell.
That phrase that you were talking about, kind of centrally supported and locally accountable, that was reminding me of a story of one of the first times we spent a longer period of time together, Jeevan. I'm sure you remember we were in one of the flex factories, and Arch was very early on, and you were going to try to help us think about, are we developing our technology the right way? And we walked to the shop floor, and you just start asking people, how is this technology affecting your daily work? And I'm like, stop, Jeevan, because like at this point we're just collecting big data and we're doing some awesome analytics for a couple central functions. And I'm like, you're not asking the right people. And you're like, no, I'm asking the right people. And you found a couple people who were like, oh, there's a report that this awesome data and analytics automates, but there was lots of people who said it doesn't affect me at all. And you were making a point to me. You were like, Andrew, like what's the roadmap to transform the way of working, like right here, these engineers, these technicians? And that struck me because, you weren't just like, oh, that's not who you focused on yet. You're like, no, this is where you should be focusing. So I guess calling on that story in my memory, like talk about your experience with core operating systems like the Toyota Way being one of the famous ones. And there's these principles like kappas and stand-ups and et cetera, but more just like from your wisdom and experience, how do you push technology companies? How are you pushing your own ventures to marry technology with core operating systems so that it's actually used and embraced by the right people in an industrial environment, especially a factory?
Yeah, Andrew, that's a great question, and I do remember that visit of ours. And looking back, I think it's a you know it's a as you go through the journey, working through a variety of different organizations, and you realize what makes some of these technology changes effective. Um, is when you can get that grassroots level traction, right? When people at the lowest level in the organization are excited about it, they're touching it, they're feeling it, and they're experiencing the benefits from it, right? And for me, there's always these three pillars that I refer to, which is people, process, and technology. And you can't make these changes work without these three pillars working in your favor. You have to really think through all these three things carefully. People, of course, being the most important one, right? When you think about any operating system, that's kind of the foundation of any operating system, if you may. And then, the process, right? And so what you and I were kind of talking about or referring to then was the process in which the information gets consumed, the process by which the information gets communicated. And, if you just take that stand-up meeting in a factory as an example, right? This is where, people diverse functions get together early in the morning, late in the afternoon, and they get together for about 15 minutes, 30 minutes. There is a clear agenda, and they walk through, how the previous shift went, how what issues they have, and then what needs to be done to be successful in the next shift. And this is where there is a need for the right information to be available, right? There is a need for a fact-based discussion. There is also the need for accountability, where you can ask people around, hey, this was your production yesterday, this was your production today, we are seeing a drop in production, why is that? What are you doing about it? And then, people will come back with actions in terms of, hey, we need to fix this, I need to improve this process, I need to reduce scrap here, and so on and so forth. And so driving that accountability through that process is also quite important. And for which you need data, right? You need really good quality data coming to you, not in a spreadsheet somewhere, not on an engineer's desk, but it should be right, where the action is. And Andrew, one of the best examples I have of that is when I was in one of our factories in Romania. I walked to an SMT line.
Great factory, yeah.
And we were doing our Gemba, and as I walked to the SMT line, one of the topics that was being discussed quite a bit was setup times. And I asked the supervisor or the manager, I forget, but asked him, hey, what are you doing about setup time reduction? Can you show me the information? And I was fully expecting him to say, hey, let's go back to the to the conference room or to the office area, and let me show you PowerPoint slides. But what he did absolutely blew me away. That factory had deployed electronic dashboards, right? So he walked me over to the electronic dashboard, which had a very sleek touchscreen interface. And he quickly went over, punched in the machines, punched in setup, and he had the last 3 years worth of setup time history trending downwards. And then he showed me, hey, our goal is to be at 10 minutes. Here is where we are at right now. And here are the 3 items that we're working on. And I said, well, do you have a project plan for that? He quickly clicked on the A3, pulled up the project plan, showed me who's responsible, showed me the actions. I had no more questions to ask, Andrew, right? So that's a great example of how the right data available to the right people in the right place allowed them to be successful at what they needed to do, which was to get that setup time down, improve efficiency, improve their cost structure, improve profitability, which I think was quite phenomenal. Absolutely blew me away. So for me, it's very important to kind of understand that confluence of people, process, technology, and understand how can I make this technology kind of blend in into the people process equation. So it's seamless and it reduces friction to the extent possible. So it's easy for people to get the data that they need and make the right decisions at the right time.
And maybe just to tag on that too, like how important it is for technology to help versus hinder. If you have it organized to be a digital dashboard in the stand-up area, to grab the A3, as you said, with like, what's the plan, and have those principles versus, could be all kinds of great whiz bang, but you kind of have to bend over backwards to flow in a logical way for a manufacturing operating system.
That's different.
That could actually do great disservice to the factory, right?
Yeah, I actually want to talk about that. I want to tap in a little bit on legacy systems and how one of the places where we see technology transition getting lost and difficulty is across legacy systems. It's so important, and yet it's also so challenging. We see this balance all of the time. It's this dynamic balance of either jumping ahead to the real technical challenges, like you said earlier. You have to really understand what the process is, and then marry that to your goal. But then you either sometimes do that, or you fixate and fixate too much on that and miss the operational goal that you're trying to accomplish. It's a balancing act, like we said. So I know you've worked across some of the more advanced and yet also some of the more legacy manufacturing systems in your career. And, you think about anytime you go in to evaluate a business or a set of sites, there's telltale signs on whether or not they're ready for successful transformation, let alone AI, right? Talk to us a little bit about that. What are the building blocks that you see that you employ? How do you rapidly bring a manufacturer into that right way, into the modern capabilities, given that every site has at least some degree of legacy systems that have to be married up?
No, great question, Jennifer. I mean, we love legacy systems because that's why we build these new softwares, these cool softwares that can kind of either replace them or coexist with them. And having been one of those guys in those companies that would be meeting with developers, I would always kind of worry when the developers would tell me, hey, it's going to take us about 6 to 9 months to develop this integration into your system, and only then can we show you value. And for me, this time to value was very critical, right? As an end consumer, I could not wait for 9 to 12 months to kind of see the payback on my investment. So this legacy system conversation is really quite critical. And now that I'm on the the other side, if you may, kind of creating solutions for the exact same people that I used to work with, I realized that value out of the gate is so important, right? You have to really significantly reduce that time to value so that people are a lot more comfortable with the technology, with the value that it drives, and of course the benefit to their customers. So for me, you talk about, Jennifer, the signs, right, and that you see when you go visit a business or you go visit a factory. And for me, the key, the very first fundamental piece that needs to be in place is the right motivation to introduce technology, right? Technology for the sake of technology doesn't do anything, right? So if there is clarity in terms of what business results the team wants to drive with the use of this technology, I think that's a good sign, right? Normally you see like the flavor of the month floating around saying, hey, the bosses have asked us to do something about AI, and so let's do something with AI. Well, that's not a good answer, right? You really need to figure out what business that you want to drive and then see, what technology would fit the best. Maybe it's not AI, maybe it's something else. So that's number one. With that foundation, now you're actually having the right conversation with the right people. The second piece, as you alluded to, was data maturity. You always hear from the folks in the business that, hey, we have lots of data that's coming from all over the place. That's great, but is that data good quality? Is it consistently good quality? That's really important to understand as well. So doing that data maturity analysis, in my mind, is kind of the number one step. And that's where I've seen companies and developers or design partners lose a significant amount of time just because they couldn't kind of figure out that data quality. And so understanding that data maturity is quite important. And I almost say like it's like phase one of any technology improvement process. You need to get your data foundations in place. Otherwise, don't even bother, right? Because the whole foundation of deploying any of these technologies is good solid data. So you need to have good technology or good data in place. The legacy systems piece, Jennifer, is quite interesting because it is almost impossible to have, I've never seen a successful integration of any software that has been deployed. And especially because there are these legacy systems, each system, be it an ERP system or MES system, has been customized, has been architected differently. It changes from factory to factory. And so it is a nightmare when you have to deal with that diversity of platforms and instances, and now you have to marry your system to it. So what I've started to believe in is more of a what I call edge-in transformation, right? So start working with just simple data files, right? Just start looking for, hey, what is the data that I need that allows me to prove the value of my solution, and then just figure out how to get that data to you, which is a lot more easier than figuring out all these expensive integrations, right? Getting a couple of Excel files or CSV files is a lot easier, right? Compared to getting, these very difficult and technical integrations, working with the IT teams and security systems and all of that, right? So for me, kind of starting at the edges, getting the data and starting to pilot some use cases and literally delivering some value in the first few days, weeks, months is super important. And that allows you then start getting traction. And that starts allowing you to get the interest. People start seeing the benefit. The moment they start seeing benefit, they realize what's in it for them. They start working with you. And then you can start working this integration issue as you go. But while they're doing that, you're already delivering value to the customer. So I think, legacy systems, yes, it is a problem, but I think you can definitely work alongside it and, coexist with it. But, for that, you have to be, somewhat methodical in your approach in terms of understanding how you're going to work alongside with it and deliver value at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to share this. As you're talking, I keep hearing this thought of, it's so important. You kind of talked about the people and the process and the technology, and that you really do have to think globally and then act locally if you're going to create institute these changes in your organization. It's funny because you realize as leaders in companies, leaders of the organization, leaders of projects, leaders of programs, that as long as you can get your people to do about anything, if they feel like they are doing it alongside a sense of purpose. If I know what the purpose is and what the goal is, it's easier to get in line with that. And, that's where it's so important to communicate. We were talking a minute ago about, do we hyper-focus on the technical capabilities? Yes, but you can get mired in that. Do we just state the goals? Okay, no, because people need the technical support. They need to know, like you said earlier, I understand what the operator is going through. I understand what they need to be able to tie this up. I think it's just so important as we go through these processes to not overlook the obvious communication that needs to happen within the organization of tying it to that sense of purpose. There's political, sensitivities that people have. There are technical sensitivities that people have in adopting these tools. And as long as they realize that they are part of that purpose, you'll just massively accelerate those transformation. That's been my observation. Has it been yours?
Yeah, Jennifer, absolutely. And for me, there has to be this hyper focus on the end user as you drive these transformations, right? The true end user. And I think that was kind of, Andrew, the discussion that you and I had when we walked on that shop floor. I'll give you a good example here. We are developing a scheduling solution for manufacturers, and our end user is the planner, right? So, when we go to these manufacturers, we actually sit down with the planners, understand a day in the life of a planner, understand how they're actually working their processes today, we're baselining the complete process and understanding what issues do they face every day, what changes do they have to deal with, what constraints do they face every day, what kind of questions do they get asked, what kind of recording do they have to provide, right? So truly understanding what they require is super, super important. And as we deliver the solutions to them, we are checking each and every box and saying, hey, you showed me that you have this issue and I've addressed it. You have showed me you have this issue with changing customer demand, and hopefully I've given you a solution to deal with that effectively. And once you start seeing, the faces light up on the other end, you have met your mark. So I think that hyper focus on the end user, I think is super important, because once you start getting that traction, once you start getting that engagement, then it's a very easy sell to the senior managements of the organization to say, hey, this solution actually works for you. And believe me, they'll come to you even before you say that. They'll come to you saying, hey, I have another 2 locations that want to go live, because they're hearing some great things about what you're doing.
We've talked a bit about the operator and leader side of Jeevan and the technologist side of Jeevan, and you're doing really exciting work with the planning capability that, I don't know, maybe we can link to, or whenever you're ready to share. Let's talk about the investor side of Jeevan a bit with IGNOVA Ventures. So you're investing in lower middle market U.S. aerospace, defense, and industrial companies and accelerating their growth with process technology, commercialization expertise. First off, thank you for doing this work. This is a really important time and space to be doing that. But second, how does this work? How are you doing this?
Thanks, Andrew, for bringing up IGNOVA Ventures. Manufacturing has been a big passion of mine, and it just continues through everything that I do. So for me, IGNOVA Ventures was just waiting to happen, and what also kind of drove the formation of IGNOVA Ventures was me and my partner. We have been when we were working with Honeywell or any other company, be it kind of metal, we have been working with a lot of these small to medium-sized manufacturers, and we know the problems that they face in being successful every day. They have to deal with a lot of ups and downs, and it's a tough job as those small and medium-sized manufacturers. But what we also started to see, Andrew and Jennifer, was the fact that a lot of these small to medium-sized manufacturers are going through what we're calling, the silver tsunami, or a generational transition, right? A lot of the founders are now at the age of retirement. Their successors are not really that interested in doing this boring, not so sexy job. And, they're facing a true challenge in terms of how do they protect and preserve their legacy. And what we feel is the true legacy of these manufacturers is a very strong customer relationship that they have developed over the last 30, 35 years. And so we want to do our best to, preserve that legacy. And also, the fact that they have a lot of very loyal employees working for them. And so kind of maintaining this job is also quite critical. But what we also noticed, as we worked with a lot of these small to medium-sized manufacturers, is their ability to grow is limited by either their skills. Sometimes it's an engineer that has developed a certain technology and has built a loyal customer base, but hasn't really spent time in marketing their capabilities to grow the business. Right? They're very happy with what they have, and for all good reasons. In a lot of cases, the founder is also risk averse. Right? They don't want to invest in technology. It's just too difficult. It is too complex. It's too risky. And so this is where we felt like we could add a lot of value, given our experience as operators in the industry, given our experience in introducing technology across large corporations, and our experience, especially in some spaces like aerospace and defense. So IGNOVA Ventures was really, it was a very straightforward thought process. But the most important thing is, how do we bring back, as we are saying today, the focus on U.S. manufacturing through the right application of technology in these small to medium-sized manufacturers. And Andrew, as you know, a lot of the technologies that are being developed, right, are being developed for large enterprises, right? So when you talk to these small to medium-sized manufacturers, it is extremely expensive to adopt any of these technologies. And so what we find is an exciting area, frankly, is to right size technologies for these small to medium sized manufacturers and make it cost effective, for their environment, but at the same time improve, their processes, improve the workflows, improve non-value added work. And there is a ton of that happens in these small companies. So we feel like there's a lot of exciting opportunities in terms of right sizing the technology, and the right technology, by the way, for these manufacturers to grow them and to deliver value to their end customers, who are these big corporations that are buying from them.
Just to last week, I was at the Manufacturing Leadership Council's Rethink conference, and it kept coming up that more than 95%, if my memory is good, I think it was 98% of all manufacturers in the US are small and medium, right? And so we have this huge ecosystem that's critical that we depend on. And like you said, digitization technologies get built first for large ones. That's not true in all other spaces, but in manufacturing it is. And so, yeah, I like the way you said that, right sizing the technology, the right slice of it, the right piece of it. So outstanding. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I don't know if this is adjacent or along the lines of what you've just been speaking to, Jeevan, but we talk about the you've noted we talked about it a little bit earlier, the fragility of the U.S. supply chain. We talked about that over reliance on overseas suppliers. We talked a lot about it last week at the Rethink conference, how crippled U.S. manufacturers are with talent and team disadvantage. Still, we've talked about it, and still it's pervasive. What specific structural shifts then do you think need to happen to really succeed in local manufacturing in the U.S.? We've talked about the people, process, technology. What role do you see with that in some of those structural shifts?
Yeah, great questions, Jennifer. And I'm living this every day now, right? So as a manufacturer, so this is all too real for me, and my team. And you mentioned it. You already said it, Jennifer. Talent, right? And it is such a nightmare to find the right talent that is industry ready, right? We are struggling to find machinists today, right? It's a skill set that just doesn't seem to exist in the kind of quantities that it is required. We are, constantly posting for these roles. There is just a lack of supply, and when we do see that supply, it is not industry ready, right? So we have to train these people, and you have to put a lot of investment into talent. So for me, what really has to kind of shift here is a lot of the technical institutes, engineering colleges have to really focus on having industry ready talent, right? I think the focus on academia is great. I mean, I think they need to learn the theory behind a lot of topics, but how do you actually turn on a machine, and how do you make a part? How do you inspect a part? I think that is important skills. How do you do CNC programming, right? Important skill. So these are some very basic skills that I feel are lacking in US today, and we really have to kind of build this infrastructure ground up. And so the kind of things that we are starting to talk about are doing apprenticeship programs, right? So we can start nurturing that talent right from when they go to school. So by the time they graduate, they're ready to be working on the jobs that we have for them. So I think through a combination of a focused effort on the right curriculum in a lot of these technical institutes, apprenticeship programs, and of course the right incentives, we need to make these jobs more exciting, more interesting for the younger generation. And for that, I think we really need to change the way technology is brought into these jobs as well, right? The way we do programming today is not that great. I think there is a lot of cool programming softwares out there that makes it actually quite exciting to do programming, and that's the knowledge that needs to be now imparted to kids that are going to schools. So I think for me, talent is a big piece. I think we can definitely talk about talent all day long. But also for me, as I said before, the developing, all the developers, the software developers and the solution providers, they need to really focus on what is it that we need to do to, cater the technology to these, small, medium-sized enterprises. Andrew, you said it, 98% of the manufacturers, 50% plus of the GDP is driven by these small to medium-sized manufacturers. It is a pretty significant force. And when you look at the aerospace and defense business, that's the backbone of that industry, right? So when you look at some of these high-tech areas, the backbone of that industry is the small to medium-sized manufacturers who are not able to use the right technology to be agile, right? So we really need to kind of think through, right-sizing, those technologies. I think the third piece, which is quite important, keep talking about reshoring, but I think it's more to do with the resiliency of that supply chain. Jennifer, kind of going back to your comments around the fragile ecosystem that we have, we need to build a ton more redundancy and resiliency in our supply chain architecture, right? So really having that system level view and figuring out, what does it take for our supply chain, our overall supply chain, not just that factory, but, right down to the raw material level to be resilient. We should be looking at kind of creating this, what I call a regional approach here. Not just, the US cannot do everything, right? So we have to recognize that, but also start developing some of our allies and ally countries to start developing those capabilities and start creating that resiliency in our supply chain architecture. And I feel that if you have that talent that we talked about with the right sized technology in this resilient and responsive local supply network, I think we can do phenomenal things. And that's what excites me about what we are trying to do here in the next 5 to 10 years. I think there's huge potential, and we are just beginning to scratch the surface.
That was a great 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
The talent, the new training programs, the right sizing of technology, and the resilient supply chains. I want to tap in, I think, especially on the first two of those, the training of talent and the tools that are good for the next generation of talent and the right sizing of technology that goes with it. So I guess my question is, do you have a perspective on a function of company size? Like, I want to talk about use cases. Like, maybe kind of dig into your brain, Jeevan, on that right sizing of technology. Like, which use cases do you see are good for big versus small right now? Or maybe it's a function of industry, but where is that right size technology meeting the talent that we actually have and moving the needle today versus what hypothetically might happen in a few years?
Andrew, that's a great question, and I think in a lot of the enterprises there is a struggle in terms of how do you deploy technology. Typically, there is an edict from the C-suite that says, let's go deploy AI. Right? In the next 3 months, I want us to all be talking about AI. We need to have AI projects. I need to have 100 projects doing AI, and really, it is a recipe for disaster, because this one size fits all kind of a model just doesn't work, as you know. You really have to kind of customize the approach right down to the factory level, right down to the product line level. And one of the things that we tried and quite successfully in a lot of these big organizations is to kind of customize the approach for a specific factory. You have to really go down into a factory and do a full assessment right down to the process level and understand what are the problems that we are trying to solve here, right? Because at the end of the day, technology has to solve a problem, otherwise it's not worth it, right? So what are the problems that we're trying to solve? What are we trying to do here, right? So understanding the business objectives, and then understanding, where are the gaps in your value stream, right? So you do your typical value stream mapping exercise, you understand the entire value delivery cycle, and then you understand where are these gaps along that value chain, and where can technology make a difference? A great example, Andrew, is in the business that we just acquired. One of our biggest objectives is to grow, right? Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And as we went into the business, I can tell you, if you walked into the business, Andrew, you would say, oh my God, you can apply this solution here. I can do this machine monitoring here. I can, apply this excellent MES system here. I can apply this wonderful ERP solution here. There's there's opportunity everywhere you look. But one of the key issues that we felt was hindering growth was our ability to respond to quotes, like, and respond to quotes in a meaningful way, in the sense that when a customer sends you a quote, they're typically expecting a quick response. And on these days of Amazon, people want a quick response. They can't wait for weeks and weeks. And our response times were sometimes in days, sometimes in weeks. And what we set for ourselves was a very bold objective of responding to any quote within 24 hours. Right. So if that is the objective, that will satisfy our customers, who will then hopefully give us more business, then we need to really fix our quotation system and all the supporting processes. So that was our first, technology implementation project, right? Is to deploy a quotation process, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah,
So
very
I
good.
think the answer here is, the answer changes based on the environment that you're in, and you have to be somewhat selective in how you, and very purposeful in how you deploy the technology. We used to go to a lot of factories, Andrew, and do a complete assessment to say, hey, you probably will benefit from using automation here. You probably will benefit from using some level of IoT technology at this specific machining center, because I know you're having some capacity issues. And so really trying to solve the bottlenecks and trying to have more of a system level view to understand what technologies or what blend of technologies would make sense here. And sometimes it was not obvious. Sometimes, even its Excel solution worked, as long as you kind of design the right macros into it. Sometimes you were kind of putting some state of the art MES systems to help them drive traceability that their customer was looking for. And in some cases, you were deploying some state of the art robotic systems because you were trying to solve a fundamental efficiency issue, right? So I think this one size fits all approach just never works. I think you have to really work from business objectives back, and then figure out what technology makes the most sense.
That's interesting because I totally agree with you, and I think that's spot on. And I kind of expected you to divide, big and small, and maybe talk about how big's moving to AI and small needs more fundamentals. And instead, even in big, you zoomed into the per factory. Like, what does this individual factory need? You gave an example of a small with quoting. And I guess that reminds me how critical it is to have visibility first in the big when you've got many factories, and in the small, maybe you can just walk in. But however you get it, like, and that's a key role of leadership today, right?
Mm.
It's not to just like think there's one carte blanche answer and single wave of technology, but making that discerning choice, even if you're big, down to the factory level to say
Right.
like what's the right size technology.
And Andrew, I think there is a place for AI everywhere, I see, right? So even in a small company, when we look at kind of where I could use AI, we are looking for easy wins to begin with. And we are creating these, chatbots where we can dump all our process information, all the documentation, and make it easy to query the information we're looking for, right? So
Yeah, it's
we are now
incredible.
creating training systems for employees, right? So how do you do that? You kind of create these training agents, right? So you start now putting all your documentation, work instructions in these chatbots, so it becomes easier for somebody to query what they're looking for, and within
Yeah.
seconds they have the information presented to them in the right format. So I feel like there is a place for AI, wherever I see, but I feel like you have to be somewhat careful in terms of how you apply it, and the progression, right? Because you don't want to overrun people, right? Because that change is quite difficult. Even to kind of get people to use, Chat GPT in companies takes a while, right? Because a lot of people have never used it.
Yeah.
I think now more people have used it than not, but still,
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
Yeah, that said, it's and I don't disagree with you, and at the same time, kind of a techno optimist lens here. Like, it's never been easier to use, and like the pace of adoption of ChatGPT compared to all part, because it's human like it literally talks to us. So even people who are Luddites, who are anti-technology, find how easy it is. So like you said, that use case of just putting your enterprise's documents together and being able to suddenly find anything, and so. I think like technology always moves a little uncomfortably fast, and there's always people pushing it too fast. And so that's definitely the case with AI. It's moving like lightning speed, and it should move like, maybe like a rushing river, but not lightning.
So I want to jump in. I love the way that you articulate the the process, Jeevan. I I think it's very clear in your mind what the long-term goal is, and it's very clear the incremental steps to drive that goal. You articulate that very, very well. I want to ask you a quick question. What is, in your experience, what is one of the greatest pervasive myths about digital transformation that frustrates you?
That it is easy. I think people that are now so used to kind of the iPhone-like technology, right, where it is, so easy to use, so intuitive, and then they're faced with these technology implementations, that are quite cumbersome, complex, tedious. They just feel like, oh, it should be pretty easy, right? We have a bunch of these smart people coming in with all this awesome technology. It should be easy, and it's not, right?
Yeah.
And that is the biggest myth. It's not that easy. It is a change, and change is never easy. It is quite difficult, and I'm sure you guys kind of deal with it day in and day out as well. And implementing the change, is a very long process, and especially when you have to make that change a part of that organization's DNA, it is a even more time-consuming and complex process, right? But if you do it right, I think you do it really well. But yeah, that's the biggest myth. It's technology should be easy. It's not.
Yeah.
I can feel our rapid fire questions coming, but before we go into that, I want to bring it back to regionalized manufacturing, US manufacturing one more time. So when you think about the work you're doing at IGNOVA and these changes happening in the world, if investments like the ones you're making gain traction and US and our regional manufacturing gains strength, what will be the clearest signals to you of progress 5 to 10 years from now? What are you looking for to know if this is really working?
Andrew, I think the easy answer to this is, if your kids and my kids, when they grow up, want to go into manufacturing, that's a great sign of success, right? Manufacturing jobs today are considered to be, boring, not cool, and we have to make these manufacturing jobs cool again. I joined manufacturing because I had this, passion for it, and that just has continued all through these years. But for the young generation, when they look at the way we do manufacturing today, it is archaic. I mean, it is not exciting. It is not the technology that they are used to using in their personal lives. And so our job is to really figure out how to make this manufacturing area exciting in terms of technology, in terms of software development. I think there's a lot to be done there. But I think more critically, when you think about kind of the vision for American manufacturing, right? I think for me a key metric is what I call time to value, right? Even in that context, when your customer gives you a problem to solve, understanding that problem, designing a solution around it, and providing the customer back with a product, right? That has to be done fairly quick. You have to be fairly agile. And, the world around you changes, right? So you have to be super responsive to all the changes happening around you. And so to make all of that happen, right, to be in this agile environment and to do these product development cycles as quick as you need to be able to, have the right supply chain network, like a resilient supply chain network that's local to you. You need to have the right technology working for you, right? So you can make those changes on the fly. You can integrate new processes and integrate new technologies, very easily. And more importantly, we really have to start thinking about the manufacturers or the shop floors of the world as a hotbed of innovation, right? This is where the next innovation should come from. This is where we should be creating new IP in terms of manufacturing things in a way that we have not seen before. There is a lot of cool stuff that is happening today in terms of either robotics or additive, or also more importantly on the technology stack that sits on top of these things and orchestrating all the different activities that are going on in the shop floor. So I really think that innovation is going to be a very key outcome out of all of this. So if you think about it, it's going to be making manufacturing attractive for talent, to make manufacturing a preferred choice versus, I'm going to go there because I cannot get into a software job. We want those software guys to be coming into manufacturing by choice. Number two is, time to value for customers, really focusing on that, getting it as far down as possible, and then really making manufacturing the hardware for innovation. I think that's a great sign that we are doing it right.
Yeah, I love that. That is exciting.
Absolutely.
Okay, time for the rapid fire questions. Jeevan, is there a book, movie, or TV series that inspires you when thinking about the future of manufacturing?
After all these years, I think I still love this book by Goldratt, The Gold. Right? I think every manufacturer has read this book, and I still love that book for its very simple concepts around systems thinking, which I think is so valuable even in today's world.
Great book.
Fantastic. Okay, which leader or innovator in technology or engineering do you admire greatly or the most, or what and why?
Yeah, I was thinking of all the current day inventors and engineers, but my mind goes back to Leonardo da Vinci as kind of somebody that I have kind of drawn inspiration from, not only because of his curiosity and his power of observation, but I think his ability to bring in a multidisciplinary approach to making things, I think was exemplary, and I think that's a great example that we could probably be using in today's world as well.
Awesome. What piece of technology outside of manufacturing has had the most impact on your life?
Andrew, I thought about this. I think you want to say the internet and all that, right? I think we've been through the internet, the AI revolution, all that kind of stuff. But for me, what is an interesting technology that helps us in our day-to-day life is GPS, which I think is pretty cool, right? It has completely changed the way we drive, we get to places, how we track our, near and dear, much to their chagrin. Also, just the way it has now evolved to the point where now, we are crowdsourcing information to help with how you go from point A to point B. It's just amazing technology that I think has changed everyday lives, but it's something that we just take for granted.
Great example. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. If you could instantly acquire any new skill or knowledge area, what would it be?
Without a doubt, learning some musical instrument. That has been an old desire of mine. So one of these days, maybe a guitar.
Let's jam. Never too late.
I can't help with guitar. Andrew can.
In a few words, Jeevan, a lot of the folks that watch this, some are seasoned experts, but a lot are younger folks that are interested in this industry. What advice would you give to young manufacturing professionals who are starting out in the field today and maybe hope to have the perspective and the scope that you've had down the road?
Yeah, I think number one is, this is a journey of learning, right? So always be seeking out opportunities to learn, right? Go talk to people, ask questions, listen, learn. I think that is going to be, super important, and all through the professional life. And seek out new challenges and experiences. And that's the way I feel like I learned and I grew, is by jumping into things that I had no idea about. Right, I just traveled to China, stayed there for 3 years. One of the best experiences of my life in terms of just growing culturally as well as professionally. So just jump into experiences. If you're not feeling a sense of discomfort in what you're doing, you're not learning. Right, that's kind of my thesis. So don't be afraid to kind of jump into new things. Just do it. And then as you kind of get into the workforce, right, one of the things to kind of keep in mind is the people that you're going to be working with, they're looking at you as a change agent, right? So you are expected to bring in fresh perspectives. You're expected to bring in change, but you have to do that with due respect to the legacy. There's always a reason why that exists, but don't be afraid to make those big transformational changes. But just follow common sense in terms of how you do those. Right? Talk to people, make sure you understand why that change is necessary, understand how it impacts them. Make that change easy to digest, but never go away or steer away from your North Star. As young manufacturing professionals, and with the knowledge and enthusiasm and the energy that you bring, your agency in driving change is super important. So that's would be my advice is, be that change agent and don't hesitate in making that change happen.
Jeevan, this was outstanding. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us and share everything.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity to be part of the speaker series, Andrew, once again. And it was a great conversation. And then can't wait to see how this thing kind of comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.